So in our last couple of videos, you may not have known this, but we actually built shape 1 and shape 2 using what is known as the subtractive method of 3D modeling. So when we built shape 1 the second time and we built shape 2, we started with a big piece and then subtracted away from it piece by piece. We call that the subtractive method, where again you start with too much and then you subtract away. If you look at our second version of shape 1, the same thing happened. We started with a big piece and we cut away extrusions piece by piece until we had our final product. And so if you think about it, it makes sense that we would call this the subtractive method. We are subtracting from a bigger block to get our final shape. And so let's go ahead and use the subtractive method to build shape 3. Let's go to a new document. Let me close out my data panel. And I want to create a new sketch. And this time I want to start from my side view. And so I don't want to start from my front. I don't want to start from my top. I want to start with the plane that's parallel to the right side view. Let me click it. And if you did it right, you should be in the right side view. And once again, I want to build something that is bigger than our final shape. So if I select my rectangle tool, I want to make a rectangle that has a depth of 1.5 and a height of 1.5. So I connect it to my origin and I drag it out and I give it a height of 1.5 and a depth of 1.5 and hit enter on our keyboard and we have a fully constrained rectangle. Let's go ahead and go to finish sketch and extrude. And it doesn't matter which way I go because I'm adding, so I'll just bring it this way. And I want to tell it to be 2.25 in width because that's how far from left to right it goes. And hit OK. And so now we have a big block which we are going to subtract from, hence the name, the subtractive method. And so the first thing I want to cut out is this sort of slant out of the side of this face. And so I want to start a sketch on the side of this rectangle. And I'll zoom in so I know what I'm looking at. And I'm going to grab my line tool to draw this slant. And I'm going to be very careful not to connect it to the center of my side or the center of my top. You can see that it's stuck to the top right now, but you can see where the center point is. It makes that little triangle. I don't want it to be in the center. I want to go to the right of the center of my top view before I click and drag. And again, I don't want to lock it on the center here. I want to drag it a little bit below the center, and I have a triangle. Don't worry about the dimension. Just draw the triangle from edge to edge. Again, make sure you don't lock it onto the center. I'm going to right-click and hit Cancel to get out of my line tool. And I want to add the dimensions. So if I grab my dimension tool, what are the dimensions of this line? Well, it definitely doesn't tell me the length of this line, but it does tell me the distance from the edge of my line to the bottom. And you might not see it, but it's actually back here. It tells me the height of this edge right here is 0.25. And so I'll type in 0.25 and hit enter. And if you're not sure how I got that, if I go to my home view, you can kind of see it. If it's 0.25 in the back, well, then it would be 0.25 in the front. I'll go back to my right view. And so what about the other end of our line? Well, this point to this edge would be 0.5. If I hit enter and go to my isometric view, hopefully you can see how I figured that out. This edge is 0.5 because it's 0.5 over here off to the left. It doesn't stop being 0.5 on the other side. And so now I have a fully constrained line. You can tell because it's black. If you're not sure, you can always check to see if it has a little red lock to see if it's fully constrained. I'm going to finish my sketch. And I want to extrude this triangle that I just created for myself to cut out, not a distance, but all the way across, and hit OK. And so then all we have left is this hole right here cut out of the top. And you might think to yourself, well, it's clearly just cut out of this face right here, so let me just start a sketch on this face. But you'd actually be wrong to cut out of this face. As a matter of fact, let me show you why that's wrong. I'm going to select this face. This is not going to be what we do, but I'm going to select this face and demonstrate what would happen if I did sketch on this face. If I just draw some rectangle, I'm not even going to dimension it. I'm going to hit Finish Sketch, and I'm going to extrude this rectangle. I want you to watch what happens. This rectangle comes out of that face, and of course it did. It makes an extrusion that is perpendicular to the plane that I'm sketching on. And so if I were to cut through my shape, you would see it would cut a shape at the wrong angle. I want it to go straight up and down, not at this weird oblong angle. And so you do not actually sketch on this face. I'm going to go ahead and hit the undo button until not only my rectangle is gone, but actually this last sketch disappears. So sketch 3 here and here disappear. So I'm going to hit undo one more time, and you can see sketch 3, that last sketch, both down here and inside our browser, disappears. And instead of sketching on this face, I'm going to do something that's going to seem confusing to you at first, most likely. I want to sketch on this top face. I want to go to create new sketch. I'll recenter it. And the reason it might be confusing to you that I'm sketching on this face is this hole is not cut out of this face. But what you don't realize, whenever you start a sketch on a face, you're not actually sketching on this face. You're actually sketching on a plane that is parallel to that face. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's grab the rectangle tool, and let's just sketch a rectangle somewhere below our shape. Let's go to our isometric view. If you look at this rectangle, if I grab my view cube and drag it down, you can see this rectangle is parallel to that face. It's not actually on that face. And so that's what I want it to do. I want to make sure top view is left and right and not up and down. I want a rectangle that is parallel to this face, but not on it. And so that's why I started a sketch on this face right here. And so I'm going to right click and hit cancel to get out of my rectangle tool. And I actually want my rectangle to be centered inside of this face right here. Let me click off to deselect that line. And I want to connect my rectangle to this edge right here. That's this edge. But if you notice, there's no edge to grab right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a projection. I'm going to go inside create and go down to project and include and hit project. And I want to project this edge. And so if you look, you can now see I now added a line to this plane that I was sketching on before. Let me hit OK. You can see that purple line that I just added to this plane. Let me go back to my top view. And so now that I've added this line into my plane, I'm going to make it collinear to my rectangle. And I've now given this rectangle one of my 4 dimensions it needs. So what about the other 3? Well, if I look, this line right here is this edge right here. And this edge is 0.75 from the front. So that dimension's pretty easy. I just go from the front to this edge, and I tell it to be 0.75. And if that's hard for you to see, let me go to my home view and try to make it a little bit more obvious that these are the same. I'll go back to my top view. And so that gives me 2 of my 4 edges. I still have 2 more to do. And to dimension this edge to this edge, I'm going to have to project it. Let me right click and hit cancel. I want to go back to create and go down to project and select this edge. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and select this edge as well and hit OK. And so what I've done, if I go to my isometric view, is I've told these edges to project onto my plane so I can use these lines or these geometries in my sketch. So go back to my top view, and I'm going to hit dimension. I'm going to tell this line to this edge to be, well, if we look, it's 0.75. If it's hard for you to see, that is this dimension right here. It's the same as this dimension down at the bottom. It is 0.75. So I'll type in 0.75 and hit OK. And then this one over here off to the right is also 0.75. That's this edge to this edge is 0.75. And hit enter. And at this point, you might not see how this is a rectangular cutout. You might just be trusting me and just following along. So let's go ahead and finish our sketch and see if I can hopefully help you understand how this is clearly a rectangular cutout that is just slanted inward. Let me go to extrude, and I want this rectangle to cut downward into our shape. And hopefully it makes it just incredibly obvious how this rectangular cutout works. So I want to go from distance to all and hit OK. And there you have it. We have shape 3, which we created purely through the subtractive method. We started with a rectangular prism without the 2 holes, and then we cut out or subtracted with extrusions those last two holes. And that's essentially all the subtractive method is. Just take a big block and cut out or subtract from it as you go. So let's go ahead and save it. We will call it shape 3. And hit save, and we are done with this shape.